Association of Chiefs. Yeah, you know what I mean, what I can do, I mean, this is. I pull the details out of this, I mean, I had the opportunity to speak with,
I'm good because I talked to him.
yeah, before we came in and said, yeah, but we make a copy of this and then just say, look, this is,
That's all I would need
this
after
is
the
kind of a
presentation.
gesture. Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, stood here and realized we don't have a recording station. So I missed it. So I didn't bring my regular tape. So I've got it.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. And Chief has my contact information, so even if they wanted to, you know, get some.
Before we start the council meeting this evening, we have a special presentation here, and Chief Bleichner and Scott Christensen. Go ahead and introduce Scott, if you would, Rick, and go ahead with that.
Sure. Good evening. Scott Christensen. He is the law enforcement liaison with the Illinois Department of Transportation. He's here tonight wearing his hat for the Illinois Chiefs Association for the Traffic Safety Committee. So he's got some information he wanted to share, and at this time I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Chief. It's a distinct pleasure to be here tonight for recognition for the police department. You know, when you're driving, distractions are a constant temptation for all of us, whether that's as a passenger in the car, whether there's a billboard out there with the latest information that you want to look at. They're changing now, and there's features in the car now that can take our attention away from the roadway that's out there. And you know, the busier we are with demanding work schedules, with home life, handheld devices are extremely seductive. They give us the ability, or not the ability, but the perception that we can multitask, and that we can do more than one thing, and that we want to do more than one thing. Now, the truth is that these distractions are really deadly. They often stop us from paying attention to the thing we really should be doing, which is driving our cars. In 2015, 3,477 people lost their lives, and an additional 391,000 people were injured in crashes that were involving distracted drivers. Texting while driving has been especially problematic among millennials, but as you all know, as we all become more technically savvy over the years, that it's not just the millennials, it's us. We think we can do and drive cars and do things while manipulating our electronic devices, whether it's a phone, whether it's talking, whether it's watching a movie, whether it's looking through things on your phone that aren't related. Can't do it. Everybody thinks you can multitask. You can only task shift. You can only do one thing at a time and do that well. Distracted driving is more than just personally risky. When you drive distracted, you're a danger to everybody out on the road. And so last April, the governor declared April 24th through the 28th as Illinois Distracted Driving Awareness Week. And during that week, over 300 law enforcement agencies, fire departments, private sector supporters throughout Illinois participated and worked together to educate motorists about all the aspects of distracted driving. And I'm here tonight to recognize the Normal Police Department for their efforts during this Distracted Driving Awareness Week. Normal Police Department was selected by the Illinois Chiefs of Police and AAA Committee as one of the top 10 departments in the state of Illinois of these 300 agencies for their efforts in bringing this problem out to the public and let them know that it's going on. Now, the one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention with this is that this wasn't about, and the agencies that won this throughout the state were not those agencies that wrote the most tickets. What determined who were the top agencies throughout the state was those who had the most comprehensive programs, which included public education and information, public outreach, including writing tickets. But that wasn't the determining factor. It was your public outreach, your public education. What did you do to let people know that this is a problem? And those were the kind of things that helped Normal Police stand out from the rest of those agencies that participated in this. And there were a lot of good agencies that did a lot of work, a lot of good comprehensive work with this. You know, some of the things that Normal did was, you know, they put out press releases to the media. They met with and spoke with TV stations, radio stations about this. They did all the social media, pushed it out there to let the public know what was going on. Officers who were assigned shift work were encouraged to focus their enforcement efforts during this time on distracted driving type violations. Tonight I'm recognizing the Normal Police Department again, and really it wasn't just the efforts of them. You came together as a community to help make a difference, to help bring the community together and help them understand that this is an important issue, to not drink and drive, to not speed, to wear your seatbelt, and in this case, do not drive distracted. So on behalf of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police and our AAA partners, I would like to present this award to Chief Blechner. And congratulations, and thank you very much for the fine work that all your officers did during this campaign.
Thank you.
Okay, we're over here.
Good.
Oh, is that? Are you good?
You got any remarks?
No, I didn't do this alone, obviously, that's why some of the officers and supervisors up here, they're the ones that put this together, they're the ones that helped consolidate those efforts, pull those details together, and push the information out, so we wouldn't have been able to accomplish this without them, so thank you.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Mayor. Is this 2 or 3?
Call to order the Normal Town Council meeting for August 7th, 2017. The clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Here.
Mr. Preston? Mr. McBride?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Mrs. Cummins?
Here.
Ask that you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get into our agenda for the evening, there have been a couple of requests to speak during our public comment period. The first speaker is Ron Ulmer. Mr. Ulmer, if you'd come and identify yourself Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I'll identify myself. I'm the same Ron Ulmer that Mr. Fritzen referred to. I'm here to talk about the proposed rate increases in the sewer bills. I have been studying them this afternoon. Both components of the sewer bill, the increase of the fixed part will go up, or the maintenance part, whatever they call it, will go up 70% over the 5 years, and usage will go up 72%. However, for a customer that consumes 6,000 gallons per month, this will result in a 124% increase, or an increase from over just $20 for 2 months to over $45 for 2 months. In recent years, the rate-making principles in gas and electric, and I know you're not governed by the Commerce Commissions, is that the fixed costs and the capital costs and the maintenance costs will be covered by the fixed part of your bill. If you notice, your NICOR bill and Ameren bill are both what they call bifurcated. And then the energy, or the whatever the service is, the gas, in this case the water, is on a separate part of the bill, and that is based on your usage and consumption and the cost of that. What this rate structure does is it actually makes it worse in the sense that it loads up more of the increase on to the usage and less of the increase on a percentage basis, way less on the fixed part or the system maintenance part of the bill. And one of the issues with this is people can avoid paying a large percentage of the increase by conserving water. Water consumption per household has been decreasing and continues to do so. And this will also cause it to will push it further that way, which will result in probably less revenue collected than is expected from this increase. But just the fact that while the dollar amounts aren't great, having your water bill for 2 months, your sewer bill for 2 months go from $20 to $45 is a considerable increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We also have a request from Mark Turritilli. Mr. Turritilli, if you'd come to the microphone and provide your identification, please.
Good evening. Mark Turritilli, 1212 Timber Ridge Court here in Normal. Thank you for having me before the council tonight. So I'm here to talk about quality of life in regards to the sewers. When we think of government, we think about roads and bridges and ambulance, fire, police, water, and sewer. And I can't think of very many things more essential to quality of life than a functioning toilet. So I'm glad we're here to talk about that tonight. I want to start out by agreeing with Mr. Ulmer on the rate structure, that a lot of what we've seen in the plan, as I've read through it, is maintenance related. And I agree with his assessment that those costs should be in the fixed part of the bill, not the variable part of the bill. That's the way to ensure that we get the money that is really needed to underwrite the costs of what this plan lays out. So if that could be discussed tonight, I would welcome that. I'm here to say that I really do applaud the work that's been done on this plan. I think there's a lot of great ideas in here and would love to see them implemented. I hope we raise some questions tonight about some things that might be a little bit fluid in there. Specifically, some of the assumptions on water usage. When I looked at the plan and its analysis, it said it took water usage going all the way back to the 70s into consideration, and its projections are exponentially upward, even though the last several years are sharply downward. The fixturing was very different back then. We were using high consumption toilets and shower heads and things like that. So I'd like some discussion on what the real trends are in the more recent history as opposed to the multi-decade long history. I'm also wondering if there isn't some sort of continuum along what's laid out in this plan. As we've noted, that we're going to double the rates here. Our rates are competitive with the surrounding communities. That was substantiated in the proposal. But it looks like, based on these 5 years and going out from there, that this rate is going to be the new normal, no pun intended, honestly, for our rate structure. And I'm wondering, does it really cost us twice as much to run a sewer system in Normal and maintain it as it does in these surrounding communities? Is there an intermediate point where we can do some of the proposals, for maybe 50% of the cost, but get 80 or 90% of the benefit? Can we have some discussion about those aspects of it? Things such as hiring new staff people. I understand the need that's laid out for that with engineering and oversight, but the plan also says that could be something that can be contracted out possibly. It offers an either or. I would like to see some discussion along those lines as well. So again, I think there's been a great case made that we need to do something to improve the problems that are facing our sewer system. I'm not so sure we've made a case that we need to go all the way forward into the future with this rate structure simply in terms of ongoing operation. So again, we offer great services here in Normal. I applaud the work of the staff and love that they've taken the initiative on this and worked very hard over the last couple of years. I think there's some legitimate questions that I would like to see some discussion on and make sure that the taxpayers get their money's worth out of every dollar that we're given. So thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That brings us to the omnibus vote agenda. These are items that through one motion can be voted on together as they're considered to be routine in nature. However, members of the council are able to pull any particular items they choose to. Anyone, if I could get a motion?
Move approval. Move. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any items to be removed?
Not to be removed, I just want to excuse myself from any expenses that might have occurred.
Pardon me?
Excuse myself from any expenses I might have incurred in today's budget.
I would ask to be excused from voting on the Bloomington offset bill. The items on the agenda include the approval of the minutes of the public hearing of July 17th and the regular council meeting of July 17th. Approval of town of Normal expenditures for payment as of August 2nd. A motion authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding between the town of Normal and Community Unit School District Number 5 regarding the creation of a joint town of Normal Unit 5 liaison committee. This was the subject of a joint meeting with both bodies here recently, which I think was a very good meeting. I think we had a good meeting that night and a good step forward there. A resolution authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement with Illinois State University pertaining to fire protection service. A resolution authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement with Illinois State University for information sharing. A resolution to appropriate $118,000 of the town's allotment of motor fuel tax funds for communication and traffic signal upgrades on College Avenue and Mulberry Street from Oak Street to Main Street. A resolution authorizing the execution of a lease agreement with the Union Pacific Railroad Company for the passenger rail platforms at the Uptown Station and an associated budget adjustment. A resolution conditionally and partially approving the final plat of the Summit House subdivision by expedited process. It's located at 602 Dry Grove. An ordinance amending a cell tower lease at 1301 Warner Street to extend the lease term. And an ordinance to renew and amend the cable television franchise agreement with Comcast. Clerk, if you call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Under general orders tonight, we have a presentation as referred to by the guest speakers on an amendment to the municipal code for sanitary sewer rates and accepting the sanitary sewer master plan dated July 14th, 2017.
Can we get a motion on that?
Get a motion on that?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wayne Aldridge is here along with Scott DeSplinter of Crawford Murphy and Tilley, which is the firm that was contracted to undertake the sanitary sewer master plan study. Andrew Hune is also going to join them in a brief presentation that provides background on the condition analysis and then the proposed rate adjustment. So I'll let Wayne kick that off once the presentation is on the screen.
Thank you and good evening. Yeah, again, here with us tonight is Scott D. Splinter. Scott's with Crawford Murphy Tilley. They're the engineering firm that performed the sanitary sewer master plan. And the presentation this evening will go through kind of sanitary sewer 101. I think many of you have seen this presentation, I think maybe a couple times before, but I think it's still informative for everyone to go through it again. And then we'll talk through the master planning process that we went through. And then finally, Andrew Hune will talk a little bit about the proposed rate study. So I'll ask Scott just to get into this right away. And again, if you have issues or questions about the technical aspects of sanitary sewers, go ahead and stop us, and we'll do our best to answer those.
As Wayne mentioned, we're going to start with a little bit of a refresher. As Wayne mentioned, we're going to start with a refresher course on how the sanitary sewer operates. So this graphic kind of helps us illustrate that any of the water that goes down your drain, either at a business or at your residence, utilizes a private sanitary sewer lateral to enter the collection system. These laterals are typically 4 to 6 inch in size, and they're usually made up of clay or PVC pipe. And they flow to a local collector main, which is most of the time located in your front yard or within the street. Sometimes they can be located in rear yards or rear easements. And they range in size from 8 inch all the way up to 16 inch. And they're constructed of primarily clay or PVC materials. They ultimately drain to a local collector trunk sewer, which is a larger pipe ranging in size from 18 inch all the way up to 60 inch. And these are typically constructed of either concrete or brick. And they ultimately flow to the regional trunk sewer system and wastewater treatment plant that's operated by the Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District. Another key component of the system are the manholes. They provide access to the staff or a contractor to inspect or maintain the sewer pipe itself. They range in size anywhere from 3 foot diameter up to 6 foot diameter or larger, and can be anywhere from 10 to 12 feet deep on average. So if your sewer can't make it to the water treatment plant by gravity, we have to install a pump station. This graphic shows that the initial part of the system remains the same. It leaves your house by gravity to a collector system, but instead of going to a trunk sewer, it flows to a pump station. And within the pump station, it flows to or is collected by a concrete wet well. These can be anywhere in size from 6 foot diameter to 15 foot by 15 foot square, and can go from anywhere from 10 foot deep to 20 foot deep. So there's quite a difference in sizes of pump stations that you can get into, and the town has a number from small to large. Most of your pump stations have submersible pumps, which means they're located at the bottom of the wet well underneath the flow, and they pump flow through a forced main to a high point in your collection system, and from that point it's allowed to drain by gravity to the wastewater plant. The forced main is another pipe. It operates under pressure, similar to a water main, but for sewage, and it ranges in size anywhere from 8 inch up to 24 inch, and is typically made of ductile iron or PVC. So what happens if a pump station fails? Well, it can force water to back up into the lower parts of the system, which ultimately is typically a basement, something that we really want to avoid. So there's a lot of redundancies built into these pump stations.
I would add, most of you know that our pump stations are located north in Normal, Ironwood area, past the interstate, and then in the northeast area of Normal.
So here are some pictures of the Ironwood pump station to kind of illustrate the redundancies that are within these stations. It also brings to light the amount of equipment that is located within them. You'll see the upper left-hand picture is actually within the wet well. There are 3 pumps way at the bottom in there, and under normal operation, a single pump operates at a time, and they rotate. So each time they alternate between when they're needed. And what that does is not only does it give you extra capacity under high flow, but it allows you a redundant pump if one were to fail. In the upper right-hand picture is the connection of that piping from the pumps to the force main. It allows you to isolate each pump if you need to repair it or replace it without taking the entire station down. The lower pictures are actually of a completely separate redundant pumping system, which is an engine-driven pump that sits next to the station. And it's there in case all of the systems at the station fails. They have used it in the past. It does operate, but it is an extra level of protection that not all communities provide on some of their stations. And there's also a backup generator that provides power for the stations when they're down. And then I think the final level of protection is the two trailer-mounted backup pumps that the town owns and maintains that they can take to either station if they had a failure of some of the smaller stations.
But again, yeah, these are investments by the council prior to the last 10 years to provide these redundancies. And also, we have warning systems at the pump station, so we know when something fails. We get a call on that, as well as our sewer division checks out every pump station once a day. So we're out there every day. So these are very critical systems, so we're on the watch all the time.
So kind of looking at your system specifically and getting an understanding for the size of it. You have over 180 miles of sewer, 3,742 manholes, 7 pump stations, and 13 miles of force main, with an approximate replacement value of $185 million. So you can tell that this is a large asset that really needs to be maintained so that you don't have to replace it. A system of this size faces numerous challenges. In our previous presentation, we talked about root intrusion, I&I, and even materials of construction. But the biggest challenge is system age, because as the system ages, those problems worsen. Whether they're a defect in a crack where the roots continue to grow into, or it's the deterioration of the material overall. And you can see here with this graphic that the core of your system is over 75 years old, and the outer portion of that is over 50 years old. And this reinforces the need for rehabilitation and inspection on this area, because these are some of your largest sewers, because most of your trunk sewers flow through this area. So your 60-inch pipes, the ones with the highest consequence of failures, come through this area and are your oldest infrastructure out there. So as the initial step of the planning process was really to form an assessment of the system, to try to develop a baseline of where you're at now so that you know where you need to go into the future. And in an effort to control costs on the planning side of this, we really looked at a sample of the system. The town had already divided the system up into 16 different watersheds. And what we did was take a representative sample of each of those watersheds and review the infrastructure within that to develop an overall rating for each sewer shed. And what this does into the future is allows you to prioritize where you start with your funding and your inspections moving forward.
I will point out a couple of these pictures. Most of you know about this equipment, but the upper right hand is one of our sewer vectors, and this is one of our mainstay pieces of equipment in the sewer division. So this cleans the sewer out. It can do hydraulic excavation for us, and it can do root cutting and other things in our sewer system. So it really is the mainstay piece of equipment for us. And we have 2 of those sewer vector trucks. And then the bottom right hand is an interior picture of our camera van. So we have 1 camera van, and that's where the folks sit and they monitor the screens that actually the remote camera is moving through the sewers, and so we can see what the camera sees, and we can actually rate the sewer as we go. So that's something that very high-tech piece of equipment.
A part of the assessment also was to hold workshops with the sewer maintenance division to build a better understanding of the existing equipment they have, the existing processes they use to maintain the system and inspect the system, to see if we can't help them to do it better and more efficiently through this process.
Some pictures too. Upper left-hand corner, that's, we think that's the airport road sanitary sewer before we fixed it. So it was a concrete sewer, it's in bad shape. Hydrogen sulfide gas is corroding it. And we actually performed improvements to that last year. We lined that pipe, which was critical. Bottom left is our sewer crew with a pole camera. So they've got a camera on the end of that pole looking into the manhole and taking pictures and documenting the condition of the manhole. The other pictures are just, bottom right is funny because it's a big, huge root that they're pulling out of a manhole there. So that's one of our biggest issues is root intrusion.
We also assessed and met with the IT department to review the GIS system along with historic drawings that are trying to be stored within that system. This is critical because your GIS system moving forward is going to be the main house for all of your inspection data. It's also going to be the main piece that you use to sort this data so that you don't have to look at the full 130 miles of sewer. You can boil that down and focus on the critical aspects first and work out from there. And then we did review sewer inspection videos for that representative section. We did this to identify problem areas and create the overall risk factor. And we kind of wanted to show you what we saw when it came to failures. Now, a lot of your system's in good shape, but there are areas that are in need of monitoring and there are areas that are in need of repair. And these illustrate that. The upper left is a picture showing root intrusion into a clay sewer. This sewer is probably 8 to 10 inches. And if you let that root continue to grow without cutting it out or without lining that pipe, it will cause the failure that has occurred in the middle because that root will continue to grow and cause pressure against that pipe and also ultimately break it apart. Or if it's a finer root, it develops a root ball that you see all the way to the right, and that will collect debris and ultimately cause a plug and a backup in the system, which ultimately usually surfaces in a basement backup that nobody wants. And the lower pictures are of a brick sewer. It's the Franklin Street sewer. And you can notice, if you look closely, the picture on the left, if you look at the crown of the pipe just under the W, you can see that crack right down the crown of the pipe. And that's a critical spot to keep an eye on because as soon as you lose a brick in that crack, a failure happens rather suddenly in that area because the bricks are all relying on each other to remain structurally sound. And on the right, you see a break-in connection for another sewer lateral and how you're starting to lose bricks around that connection. And what will happen there is when the pipe or the man surcharges, fills up with water, it'll pull soil in from around there along with bricks. And it starts to lose the structural integrity of the soil around the pipe and can cause a collapse or a settlement in that area.
And I would say for repairs, like the upper right hand, that root intrusion, something like that, we'll stick the Vactor in there and probably cut that root out, clear that line. If it's like the middle picture, I bet you we dug that up. We had to dig that up and replace that line of sewer. So that's what we call a point repair, and hopefully the rest of the sewer is not in that condition. If it is, it's a much bigger repair.
And typically, even when you do a point repair, you'll line that main after you've done that point repair because even outside of that repair section, you've disturbed the soils there and you can see settlement in the years out. So while you're there, you want to make sure you do the complete fix. The last part of the assessment was to visit all of the pump stations with the staff. We were able to review their inspection process and their daily routines along with picking their brains about what their concerns were on either replacement or failures that they've experienced and problems with these stations in the past.
Just point out a couple things. Upper left-hand corner, that's Airport Road pump station. So that tank there is full of a chemical called, proprietary chemical called bioxide. And that's what we treat that sewer with, because we've had an issue with the hydrogen sulfide smells and residents down the line. And so that's the best treatment we've found yet for getting rid of that sewer smell issue.
So this assessment really helped us form the backbone of our plan and approach moving forward. And it really focused on collector and trunk sewers, manholes, pump stations, force mains, inflow and infiltration, septic systems, and personnel and equipment. To dig in a little more on each one of those, we'll look at collector and trunk sewers. The primary goal on these is to line them prior to a failure, identify the defect before you have a failure and deal with the consequences of failure, whether that's backups into basements or damage to other infrastructure in the area. And the initial part of the plan has identified lining for areas that are already known to have problems, but a big portion is to assess the rest of the system within a 5-year period. And we think this is critical because when you look at the majority of your system, it's made up of clay pipe. And clay pipe is great for corrosion resistance. You know, concrete's bad, which is what you've seen on Airport Road, so that's a good thing. But it's very susceptible to poor installation practices or groundwater movement or even root infiltration or intrusion into it. So to clean and televise the system in 5 years, we're proposing to have your sewer maintenance division clean 62.5 miles. That blue wedge, I don't know why our text is messed up, but that blue wedge is indicates 19.9 miles that your staff has already inspected from the initial parts of the master plan until today. And then the green section makes up the section that an outside contractor would be hired to come in to clean and televise and inspect. And that would make up 97 miles. Their section would be focused on larger diameter trunk sewers and high traffic areas, areas that your staff isn't set up to inspect right now. Your existing inspection equipment can get into 16-inch and smaller pipe. As soon as they get to be 18-inch or larger, they need to have a contractor come in and perform those inspections. The manholes, there are 19 in critical condition that we've identified in the initial 5-year period for rehab or replacement. But a big portion of them too is to complete the inspection and the assessment on those. And we would propose to have those done at the same time that the sewers being inspected. To illustrate this, you've got only 3% that is concrete block and 4% is brick, and 28% is concrete, which is good. That's the preferable kind. But you've got 65% that we don't know. They've never been inspected and they've never been documented for material. So the full need on the manhole side is yet to be determined. And then the pump stations, you've got 4 main pump stations: Northtown Road, Ironwood, Northbridge, and Airport Road. 3 of your biggest, Ironwood, Northbridge, and Airport Road, that are nearing the end of their 20-year mechanical service life. And what does that mean? That means pumps, electrical equipment are going to see failures and be in need of replacement, preferably before they fail when they get around this time period. We've planned for those replacements in the 10-year period, and you've already started this on the Ironwood pump station, where you've replaced a couple of pumps and some controls in that station. Force mains, you've got 13 miles of force main. Unfortunately, 99% of them are ductile iron, and you've experienced corroding of the ductile iron pipe due to aggressive soils and the sewage strength. These are not easily assessed currently for structural stability or structural stability of them, but the technology is improving, and we expect the cost to perform this assessment to come down in the outer years of your program. And it may be something that you're able to do to better identify what areas need to be replaced proactively. You have proactively or reactively a little bit replaced the portion of the Ironwood force main in 2016, which was a project of great need.
But you might recall in Ironwood, we were under a consent agreement, which is a pretty friendly form of encouragement from the EPA to replace the sewers. So we were under agreement to get that done by February of 2017, and we did achieve that. So the Ironwood force main system, the sections that were bad were replaced and done in conformance with that agreement. So that's a new force main up there.
In the last part of the program is the understanding that this is a process. You're going to continually assess this system moving forward and continually monitor the defects in the repairs that you make to make sure that you're achieving the level of service and that you're shooting for. This will include collector and trunk sewer cleaning and televising, preferably with your own staff, manhole inspections and ratings, and hopefully the force main condition monitoring can come down in cost and be something that you can plug into the later years of your program. And then once you've addressed your structural concerns within your systems, you can look to switch focus to reducing inflow and infiltration into the system. And what this will do is preserve your capacity for future developments and for future needs of the system. And then ultimately, you'll have to determine and monitor whether additional equipment or personnel needs are necessary as the system ages and your age of your system grows out from there. So to look at the proposed plan that the Sanitary Sewer Master Plan identifies in the initial 5 years, the capital improvement or investment plan is to clean and televise the overall system and to assess conditions. This will establish a risk rating, and what the risk rating involves is an age factor, a size factor, and the inspection code or score. And it takes these three and combines them and helps the town and the staff better identify those areas that are most in need of the funds in the replacement or rehab at this time. What that does is allow you to get the most bang out of the money that you're trying to spend versus being reactive to only responding to failures as they occur. We're proposing to line critical trunk sewers and sanitary sewers. You can see the photos at the bottom. They highlight a lining process. The middle photo is the before photo that shows a collapse or a defect in the pipe on the side of the pipe. And you can see just to the right of that what it would look like after it's been lined. And they can line right by that defect. Now the problem is if you can line a pipe before it actually has a collapse, you can line it and move on. But if there's a collapse there, there's a chance that you can clean the sewer and the debris out of the way and line right past that collapse. The problem is there's a void on top of that pipe that you're still gonna have to make an excavation in the street to fill. Otherwise, you'll see it as a sinkhole or a pothole later on that you'll have to deal with at that time. So that's where proactively you can save money in your plan and get more bang for your buck if you're repairing sewers before they collapse. And the key is to continue to work towards that.
And I'd say the lining projects are kind of the mainstay of the plan. If you look at the plan, there's lining projects, and some of them may not be identified in the future, and that's probably the most flexibility we'll have in the plan too, is you can add to or take away as we go along based on needs for the lining projects. But really, again, that's building a pipe within a pipe. There's minimal excavation, and it's the way to do the work, and there's more and more contractors bidding on these types of projects now, so the prices are starting to come down.
We would plan to rehabilitate critical manholes. You can see on the lower left, there's a picture of a manhole that has been lined. That was a brick manhole previously, so you'd see the brick and the failure, and they come in and they do an epoxy coating sometimes. Sometimes it's a cementous coating, depending on the nature of the failure. We would also plan to construct sanitary sewers to septic sewer system areas. These tend to follow demand when these areas have failures of their septic system. that's the time to build them and take them onto your system so that you can remove that failure, but also have a willing participant, whether it be for easements or access, to be able to construct the sewers.
And we've identified these in the plan, these areas, and I think we have a plan going out soon to take care of one of these areas. But, you know, you don't hear about them until somebody's got a problem, and then it's a big deal, and to that particular resident, of course, so.
And then finally, address the concrete corrosion within the Ironwood wet well. The concrete within the wet well is starting to corrode and deteriorate due to the hydrogen sulfide gas that you're experiencing within that wet well. And what this project would do would be to take the wet well out of service temporarily, sandblast that off and do a coating in there to protect the concrete into the future.
And then finally, we did propose in the plan 2 staffing positions, and that's included in the proposed rate study as well. One position we envision as being more purely engineering on the plan development side of developing plans for these improvements. And then another position on the operations side, so more of on the maintenance and scheduling and inspection side of the sanitary sewer program.
So in the post 5-year, the capital improvement plan is a little more flexible. And the reason we've left it that way is your assessment in the initial 5 years is gonna fill in the gaps that we don't have on trunk sewers and manholes and some of your other collection system. And through that, we anticipate identifying other critical need projects that will float to the top in these areas. And we'll be able to know that and sort those through the efforts that you've done with your GIS system. And we'll plan to rehabilitate manholes, replace aging pump equipment, and rehabilitate critical force mains as they come up, whether it be by leaks or breaks that you experience. Inflow and infiltration. Once you've addressed the structural issues, as I mentioned, you can switch your focus to identifying and trying to eliminate infiltration. The reason this is important is, number one, it preserves capacity. Number two, it lowers your overall operating costs. You're not having to pump those. You're not forcing Benward to treat those flows that are gonna keep your overall costs down for your citizens. So as a part of the inflow and infiltration, the program has you refining an approach and starting with the Ironwood subdivision. It has been identified as a high I&I area, mainly due to the large increases in flows that you see at that Ironwood pump station. It's a natural kind of monitor of that area, and it sees a rather large increase under a rainfall event that shows there's extra water getting in that system, and to determine why. Now, there'll be lining on the private or public side, and there could be some things on the private side that are also contributors there. And then ultimately working with Benward. They have a lot of flow monitoring data for their system and can have offered to perform some flow monitoring for the town as things progress. And continue to construct sanitary sewers for other septic system areas. And then monitor your overall staffing levels and equipment to determine, as the system ages and you know more about the system, to make sure that you have the appropriate level of staffing out there to continue to be able to clean and maintain it.
So this one, I'm pretty proud of this one because this reflects what our sewer division's been doing, televising sewers. So prior to 2016, when we did this plan, you know, they'd go along and they'd hit critical areas as they thought they'd occur, or problem areas. And so we were averaging about 6 miles a year, which is good. But when this plan came forward, we really challenged our sewer division to get more sewer miles televised and rated. And they were hesitant at first, but really took on the challenge really well. And so in 2016, they did about 19.7 miles of sewer. So not just doing the things that they have to respond to, is they also were doing this sewer rating. And I think in 2015 and 2016, that's when we did also certify 4 of our workers in the PAC certification program. So they're certified to rate these sewers as they go and record the information as they're televising. So We set the goal for them to get 12 miles of sewer a year, and I think they've gone beyond that. So any work that they do beyond that cuts down on the contractor work that we'll need to do to assess the entire system. So again, they've been doing a really good job with that and really responded to the challenges. The pictures here, I think, aren't really great, but that is Airport Road. There's some, for sure, actual pictures of the Airport Road system showing the bad corrosion that we were happening and loss of the section. So we were very close to a failure of that pipe, actually, and it's not that old. That's what this hydrogen sulfide corrosion will do to a pipe. But went back in, and then the lower picture is a picture of the actual lining. So basically, that's got a brand new sewer pipe in there that won't be susceptible to the corrosion any longer. So a very critical improvement and timely improvement.
And to highlight on that certification that Wayne mentioned, it's critical to have your guys trained in that, because it won't be the same person or even the same contractor that's inspecting each section of sewer main. And what we really need to do is to have an apples to apples comparison of what each main looks like. So now that they've had this certification, we're comfortable that when one inspector gives us a rating for a pipe, it's comparable to the other inspector, and this certification allows you guys to do that.
And then going along with this rating system, we have had a sewer rating software package, but the council actually approved a newer upgrade to that package called the Granite Inspection Software. So this is loaded on the TV trucks and provides all the rating software right in front of the operators. So they again can rate the sewer, televise the sewer, make any notes that are necessary, and then that gets automatically updated into the GIS system. So that was a big critical step for us, and then that'll help with our contractors as they come on board too. So then again, that's the full implementation of GIS. So once this work is done, we can look at on our computers, pull up that map to the left there and click on a manhole or a sewer line and see all the information that's available to that, including all the ratings and pictures and plans and things like that. So very proud of that and getting this software online and to get that GIS working like that. Getting into the rate increases, but first, any technical questions about the physical sewer system? You can ask any time. But this is a slide we decided to show a comparison of existing sewer rates in other communities. And these communities, there's differences here. So it's not entirely an apples to apples, but these other communities have a system that's similar in the sense that they operate the collection system, and there's a sanitary sewer district that does the treatment. So we kind of split that out, treatment costs versus collection costs. And what I will say about this, we don't want to, Scott's worked with several of these communities and has specific information, but probably don't want to get into some of that. But what we can say is that all of these communities have sanitary sewer work to do, and they know it. Many have completed sanitary sewer plans and rate studies. Some are we think, being progressive about that, so they haven't maybe taken some of these steps yet, but they're trying to be progressive with their sewer systems. Some are in trouble. Some are under consent decrees and other issues from the EPA, so they will have to deal with their issues, either in increased fees or debt or whatever else, to take care of some problems. And others may not be dealing with the issues, so that's another option some of these communities have. But they all have sanitary sewer issues, and if you talk to any public works director that I know of anyway, we all have the same issues with sanitary sewers. So it is a across the board kind of an issue. Andrew?
Thanks, Wayne. I think anyone that looks at that presentation and has read through that project report can certainly see there's going to be additional cost associated with addressing this issue. We worked with Scott and Wayne and his group to develop a rate structure that would essentially overlay the capital and operating needs of the system for the next 5 to 6 years. This is a system, a model we've used in the past with water very successfully back in '09, and we essentially use the same process this year. Really, we have two overarching goals in this process for a rate structure. One, we want to get the fund balance in sewer fund to a reasonable, financially prudent level. Right now, the council is well aware that for several years it has not been anywhere near that. It's not bankrupt, but it is certainly struggling significantly. In terms of capital, we want to make sure we can fund the system capital needs appropriately. The system analysis that's been done, the system review that will be occurring in the next 5 or 6 years, again, is going to cost significant money, about $1 million next fiscal year, and about $1.2 million every after that. So our two goals are, one, bring the fund balance to a reasonable level. We're doing that. We're easing into that with this rate structure. We're easing into it over 5 years, so we're not getting over there overnight or even in 1 or 2 or 3 years. Our goal is at year 5 to bring the fund balance to 20%, which is frankly a little bit below industry standard for sewer funds and utility funds. However, we didn't want to stress the rates too much to get there. And we want to make sure that we have enough money set aside for the capital needs that are being prescribed in this rate study and going forward. So we feel that the rate structure that we're going to propose tonight, which you see in your report, will achieve those two goals. If you go to the next slide, this will give you a little bit of perspective. You can see historical and proposed rates. We go back to 2010. We have a rate that's per 1,000 gallons, and we call a system maintenance fee, which is a fixed minimum rate that everyone pays. We're at $1.19 in rate per 1,000 back in 2010, and then $1.50 for the monthly maintenance fee. I won't go through all of them individually, but if you skip down to the proposed ones, what we're suggesting, and this is very similar to how we did it for water, is in October 1st of this calendar year, in this fiscal year also, we're recommending going up to $2.02 per 1,000 gallons. That's 75-cent increase over our current rates of $1.27 per 1,000. And then, of course, a 50-cent increase to the system maintenance fee from $2.50 to $3. Then you can see on the later increases, we're not quite as significant, about 21 cents per 1,000 gallons of usage, and then 25 cents to grow that fixed rate, the system maintenance fee. We find that makes a lot of sense to, again, we are playing a little bit of catch up here financially for the fund because it isn't significant problems. There's virtually no money for capital in the fund, and it's operating essentially on a break-even basis right now. So again, not the place we want to be. The council is well aware of that they know this has been talked about and this is coming. As staff, we feel this is the best approach to have, a fairly, in terms of the other rates, a fairly sizable increase in year 1, again, to essentially prime that revenue coming in, and then develop more of a maintenance increase in the out years. In terms of, the next slide, in terms of the impact to our residents, this is what a typical utility bill looks like from the town. You can see there are 5 components to it. We're only addressing right now the sewer usage component. We're not increasing water rates. Benwood, we don't control that. That's a separate governing body. We're not changing what citizens pay for garbage, recycling, bulk waste, or stormwater. So you can see by the slide there, the sewer usage, we're going from $10.12 a month to $15.12 a month, so a $5 increase on a typical user of 6,000 gallons of water and sewer usage per month. In terms of going out, that $5 turns into $1.51 in the out years in terms of the same typical user and what they would be charged. So next year, the rate increase, presuming that it's approved, would be $1.51 more in terms of cost, and then so on for each fiscal year.
And I think that's the end of our presentation, but again, I think that I'd like to say this is, from our aspect, a very proactive approach to taking care of our sanitary sewer system. The IEPA likes us. We report anything that's out of the ordinary with them, and they've always said that they appreciated the work we do. So we're in good situation with them. But there are some things that, are scary out there for us, and we certainly don't want something critical to happen to us that we just have to react to on an emergency type of situation.
Mr. Fritzen, if I could make just a few concluding comments as well, and I like the word, it's been said throughout the evening, proactive, and that's what this is all about, and that's really Normal's history when it comes to infrastructure. I think, and it predates me, but we have always been proactive in maintaining infrastructure and investing in infrastructure, knowing how critically important it is to literally everything we do as a community, certainly quality of life, but economic development and so forth. I think about stormwater, the millions and millions of dollars we've invested in stormwater management and detention and retention basins throughout the community that have saved us all sorts of problems downstream over the years. Some of the last several years we've had heavy rains that would have been catastrophic had you not made these decisions to invest in stormwater. And we continue to do that now with the stormwater fee. We continue to invest in managing our stormwater system proactively before it's a major problem, so those things don't occur. We've done it with water. Clearly, we put water on a very sustainable track, the water fund. We're investing lots of money in the system. We've just completed some very high-profile water main projects this year, and I think the system is in as good a condition as it ever has been. Roads and bridges, I think the money that we've spent on bridges in the last 10 years, Gene's nodding his head, it's been amazing. And that's all trying to be proactive, get out in front of these structures and make sure they're safe and well-maintained, and our roads as well. And now we're at sanitary sewers. And, I think we've done a pretty thorough assessment of the condition. I would say no big surprises. We knew most of the areas of deficiency, and that's the good news. I think the study confirmed much of what we knew and provided us with helpful data and some specific budget parameters on what's going to take to repair them. And the good news is we have some problems, but nothing that I would call catastrophic. And Mr. Aldrich mentioned, and I know for a fact there are other communities on that list that are dealing with some catastrophic sewer issues that have occurred because they haven't gotten out front, they haven't been proactive. So I don't know if any of you, some of you old as I am in the room, remember the old Fram oil filter commercial. You can pay me now or pay me later. And that's really what we're talking about here. This is, nobody likes to pay increased fees. But I think in the long run, by taking this approach, and I think the fees, we've tried to be sensitive to the impact on residents. I mean, we probably could have easily justified higher fees, but we felt this was a reasonable level to go to try to get out ahead of our system and get some of these critical issues addressed. But by enduring some short-term pain and getting some of these issues that you've heard about tonight taken care of, we're going to avoid huge long-term costs, because when you get to the point where these sewers cannot be relined, they're in such a condition they can't be relined, now you're talking massive dollars and a lot of disruption in neighborhoods, and that's what we want to avoid. So I think this is a very responsible, fiduciarily responsible approach to addressing some issues that we know are there, and we know we've got to deal with them sooner or later. Let's do it sooner and do it and save money by doing it in having less expensive methods than waiting longer when we do have catastrophic failures that really adversely impacts the lives of our residents and our business owners in a dramatic way. So I think it's a very responsible approach, and I think from a financial perspective for the users, it's clearly the cheaper alternative. And I think the rate structure that's been developed here is a reasonable, and I think it's sound. By putting a little more emphasis on the consumption part of it, we're insulating the small user a little bit. It was suggested earlier, you should put more on the system maintenance fee that everybody pays. Well, the downside to that is that impacts that small user, that single person in a house that in some cases, some of our retirees and people that are on fixed incomes, that hits them a little harder. So I frankly like the approach of trying to protect them a little bit. They're still going to pay more, but putting a little more emphasis on the consumption-based component of the formula. So I think it makes sense, and I think it's defensible. So we're prepared to respond to questions.
Any remarks or questions from members of the council for either our presenters or other staff? Ms. Lorenz?
First of all, the study is fascinating and I think very well done, so thank you. I'm kind of curious, though. I guess it was eye-opening to me that that maybe such a comprehensive study such as this hasn't been done in the past to this extent, and I guess that's a question. And if that's true, because that was kind of the impression I got from your presentation, is that because maybe in the past technology didn't allow it to be done efficiently or effectively? I mean, what's changed? Why are we suddenly realizing now, oh my goodness, there are some real threats out there? So what's been the change?
You want to go ahead?
I'm not aware of a study by Normal on their system. Overall, the industry has changed a little bit and switched its focus from a lot of focus had been on treatment and the receiving streams and that, and it's kind of chased its way up through regulations, and a lot of communities are seeing specific requirements for maintenance and operations studies like this on their systems. Now, you guys are not under that requirement that I'm aware of, that it would typically come through your discharge permit, which Benward owns. So I suspect that's why you've not seen it. But I think it's kind of a term that's kind of started to come its way around the industry, and your staff is latched on it, knowing that there was a need out there and wanting to be able to tackle this, but tackle it in a fiscally responsible way. And to do that, the way we worked things out was to push some of the more detailed assessment, the cleaning and TVing of the entire system into the program versus trying to tackle that up front.
Okay.
And I'd say part of it is age of systems.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was
everybody's, their age of their systems is getting about to be the same, There's certainly some older systems out there, but everybody's kind of in the same boat where they're having to look at their older sewers. And technology is one of them too. I mean, now we can see what's happening. Before, people couldn't necessarily see what's happening in a lot of these sewers, and so they were responding to sinkholes or other bad issues that, must have a problem here.
Well, it's an interesting point you mentioned about age of system too, because if you can go back to that one graph that shows the size of the map, basically. 25 years ago, you didn't have Ironwood and north of Northtown.
Right.
Yeah. So that plant now is reaching that point of some problem. That wasn't even on your radar 20 years ago. And then that's been worsened by the fact that you've got some funky things happening with the soil there, with some kind of exacerbated corrosion.
Right.
And so, I mean, I kind of was answering my own question last night as I was studying this, thinking, well, all right, it's kind of the coming of age that, you blew out a bunch of homes up there, 583 to be exact, in Ironwood alone, and now it's 30 years old, so that's part of the why now.
And that's an important point to make about pump stations. 30 years old, you better be looking at you've hopefully been maintaining them, but pump stations need constant surveillance as far as maintenance, and that's, so north of the interstate in the northeast, that's the situation we're in out there with pump stations. The other kind of, and I think you may have asked this before, Ms. Lorenz, is about the what's the worst thing could happen, and pump stations are certainly something to pay attention to, but the other is trunk sewer systems. I mean, these systems provide service for a lot of folks out there. They're buried sometimes in inconvenient areas to get to, close to buildings, things like that. So those are probably some of our first priorities, to get a very good handle on the trunk sewer systems and get those repaired if as necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lorenz, just if I could, respond to your question, why now? I think we've gotten more sophisticated. I think Wayne is responsible for that in large part when he went down to Public Works. I mean, we're taking a much more professional, sophisticated approach to managing those operations, so I give him a lot of credit. We've been talking about this the study's been going on for, 3 years anyway, every bit of 3 years, and we've been talking about it for longer than that, knowing it's something we needed to do. So I think we're just upping our game. Probably should have been done sooner, but we got by, and I just think it's high time we did it. It is, as Scott mentioned, it's a huge asset in terms of its value, and we need to be very proactive in maintaining it. It's just like we have kind of taken the same approach with the water system.
Good. Mr. McCarthy?
Well, first I want to say thank you for the thorough presentation and the report, and really responding so well to our request to provide us with some options. Most of us have been through at least one budget cycle, several of us many budget cycles, looking at our fund balance and hearing concerns from you and us about, if we end up chasing problems around town, this is going to be in a very expensive way to go about things. So I appreciate the thoroughness of what you guys are doing. Of course, I'm concerned about the 65% of manholes and the other assets that we haven't assessed yet, and what that might mean in the future for our budget, but that's why we're doing this, right? Is so we know and can professionally deal with it. And I guess a little bit to the larger point, I think, this is in line with what we've been doing in the last several years, from our facility management, for our first facility management assessment, and facility management plan for how do we progressively manage those assets. And this is another approach, and we've done it in water. So I'd say arguably we're doing this systematically through the entire town operations and assets. And I can't say that I've been very excited to hear all the details about the sewer system, but I'm glad that we're seeing it. Somewhat, I don't know, I agree with fascinating, but it's certainly been enlightening. Just a point of on what we're actually doing tonight. So we're voting on a rate increase.
Yes, you're receiving the study, essentially accepting the study, and you are voting to approve the rate increase that's included in the report.
Okay. For all out years.
For all out years, that's correct.
Okay. And so what we're doing tonight is ensuring that what we see so far, that we're going about it systematically, and we have a way to, in fact, pay for that per it. One of the questions I've been getting is, why aren't we taking money to pay for this from other fees and all of that? Can you give us a little bit background? I mean, I know we all know about that, and maybe everybody in this room knows about why we can't mix funds, but can you talk a little bit about enterprise funds?
Absolutely. And then Andrew can correct what I misspeak to. Enterprise funds are water and sewer in our particular case, and we operate those like a separate business entity. And so those systems need to generate, through user fees and charges, the revenue to operate them. So in the case of the sewer fund, the maintenance and operation, as well as capital improvements in the system, have to be generated by the system itself. Those dollars cannot be taken out and used for other things. We can't, let's say, all of a sudden, the revenue's coming in at a greater pace than we expect, and we have a surplus. We can't take that money, or you can't take that money and say, let's spend that on the police department, or acquisition of property, or a new swimming pool. On the other hand, although there's not a legal restriction, it is generally considered bad public policy to use other tax dollars in an enterprise fund. I don't believe there's a legal prohibition against taking money that you might generate from property taxes and sales taxes and giving them to a sewer fund or a water fund. but it's generally not considered to be good policy to do so, particularly if you have limited resources in your general fund. You're just shifting one problem to the other. I know communities, we may have done it years ago, did some borrowing. We actually loaned, I think we did this in the sewer fund one time years ago, loaned them some money on a short-term basis because the fund balance was low and there was a project that needed to be undertaken. That was paid back. So we don't like to do that, but that can be done if there's a crisis situation. But ordinarily, the sewer fund and the water fund need to be maintained as completely separate entities with no commingling of dollars from other sources. Anything I left out there? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a couple of questions. One comment, Mr. Peterson remarked about some of the stormwater work that has been done over the years, and I do recall whenever we'd have a significant rainfall that we had surcharging of the system because there was so much inflow and infiltration. So we did take care of that problem for the most part.
Yes.
Not that we don't have some I&I now, but it was a significant issue before.
Yes, it was.
In the past. And so part of that too was disconnecting illegal hookups of drainage water, storm water into the system as well. So a lot of work has been done in the past that the town invested in. So this kind of goes along with those types of improvements. This, as Mr. McCarthy said, here's another system improvement that the town is undertaking and on behalf of its citizens. Really, without this, we would just be doing triage on the system and then figuring out how are we going to pay for this, which Mr. Peterson just referred to, that you can do that, but it's not a best practice, obviously. So we're really doing an assessment and then planning to address aspects of what that assessment tells us, and also establishing a payment schedule, a way to pay for it. A couple of questions came up during the public comments that I'd like for you to address. One was and I appreciate Mr. Peterson's remarks regarding the service fee versus the elastic cost based on consumption. But there was a question about some of our revenue assumptions and some of the historical data that were used about with water usage and the like. So could you address that to help us understand how you arrived at the numbers and how you worked with that historical data?
I think you established the water data stuff, right?
Let me just jump in there if I could. They're assumptions. They're our best guess for what water consumption is going to be in the future, and there's all kinds of ways to make those assumptions. But I think the speaker earlier indicated that water consumption has kind of leveled off. I should say growth in water consumption has leveled off when you look at a per unit, the consumption per unit, per housing unit. And a lot of that is efficiency in fixtures. Low flow toilets and showers and things like that, those have become commonplace. But we still are anticipating, what maybe the speaker didn't quite understand is that also anticipates growth in the overall system. So even though on a per unit basis, water consumption is not growing like it maybe was in the past, but we are also assuming that we're going to have growth in the community, and we're going to have new facilities that will be water consuming businesses and homes and the such. And of course that then translates into sewer flow. So it's our best guess today. Frankly, if we miss on that particular element, it won't have a huge impact on the revenue. It'll have little impact, but it's our best guess based upon a number of assumptions involving growth in the community. Right now, there's not a lot of growth occurring, but we certainly expect long-term that we will return to a more, we'll see more positive growth. But it is an assumption, and we never know for sure whether we're gonna be right. Maybe we'll be low, maybe we'll be high. But I think it's a reasonable assumption, and even if we miss a little bit, it shouldn't have a huge impact on our revenue. And again, we're gonna be revisiting this in 5 years. So this is a 5-year plan, and we'll be able to assess in 5 years how we doing, like we've done in the water. We every year we assess how are we doing. And thus far, we feel we're still doing pretty good. We frankly had expected to be back to the council before now with the water fund asking for another, but we've done some maintenance tweaks along the way, and that's taken care of us. So we'll continue to monitor it, and if we find that revenue is lagging from what we had anticipated and the need is there, we'll come back to you and talk about that. But at this point, we feel comfortable with what's been proposed. Again, it's not, we could have probably justified a higher rate increase, but we looked at the staff level and we have to kind of balance this a little bit. So we pulled that down. We still think, and Andrew pointed out, still think it's solid and reasonable. We could have, argued for a larger fund balance, but 20% isn't bad. It's a little lower than what is typical in utilities, but it's a lot better than where we are today, I'll tell you that much.
I was gonna say, you addressed it, the sewer fee is based upon water usage.
Yes,
And
right.
so we've already been down this road a bit with water usage, so we
Right.
have a sense of how well that's worked, and it's, you just said it's actually worked a little better than we anticipated. So we've got some historical data in that regard to follow. Okay. As far as employees, additional employees somewhere along this process, contract employees don't come cheap. How would you assess your, as we go forward, if we determine that we're going to hire somebody as opposed to contract with someone? First thing I would think of is that if I have somebody in-house, the familiarity that they're going to have and the consistency they're going to bring to the project is a positive. Are there other aspects of that you would say that's probably the better way to go?
Yeah, there's an issue with control. You know who they are. You're training them. You're mentoring them. They have other roles potentially to play with the town. So I think that's an important part to me. And yes, usually contract employees don't have that kind of flexibility, and they are typically more expensive unless they're assigned a particular role, which does happen. So I anticipate these employees actually are a little bit more flexible than a contract employee may be as a town staff member, and are mentored as any other employee and become, maybe something else in the future. So that's the way I kind of see it.
I would add to that if I could. If these positions we anticipated that they would be needed for 2 or 3 years, and then we wouldn't, I think it would make sense to look at a contractual position. It's always hard to get rid of full-time people, even if you tell them up front, hey, this is going to be a 2 or 3 year job. But I think in that case, it's a little easier to make those staffing changes through a contractor. Clearly, on an hour-to-hour comparison, the contract employee is more expensive than a regular employee, even if you factor in the cost of benefits and so forth. In this particular case, these are not short-term, these are long-term needs. And so I think from a financial perspective, it's cheaper to go with a full-time employee. Plus, as Mr. Aldridge said, there's a lot more flexibility with a full-time employee than you would with a contract employee. But there are some circumstances where I think looking at a contractual service for this might be appropriate, but not in this case.
Any other questions? Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye. Motion carries. That completes our general orders on our agenda for the evening. We have, thank you, gentlemen, for your help with that. One item of new business, which is a motion to approve a reappointment to the Connect Transit Board. And as a personnel matter, if we need to have any discussion on this, we'd have to adjourn to executive session. If I could have a motion. Mr. McBride?
I'd like to recuse myself from this item, please.
Okay, thank you.
Move approval?
Second.
All right, thank you. Clerk, if you call the roll.
Mrs. Cummings? Aye. Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye. The reappointment is of Mike McCurdy to a 4-year term on the Bloomington Normal Public Transit System Board. It expires on June 30th, 2021. Mr. McCurdy was originally appointed to the board in 2012 to fill the position vacated by the city manager, who by ordinance became an ex officio non-voting member of the reorganized board. So we thank Mr. McCurdy for his willingness and very active duty on that Connect Transit board. They've had a lot going on here recently in particular, and we thank him for his interest in that. That completes our agenda. Before we adjourn, are there any concerns any of the council members would like to bring to the table? Mr. McCarthy?
No concerns, just a comment, receiving lots of positive feedback from our recent Constitution Trail improvements, both under the bridge and the repaving projects. A lot of positive public comments. Over the weekend alone, probably 20 different approaches about our job maintaining the trail. So clearly it's on people's mind and it's important to us. So thanks for all that good work.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, just a few things. I want to first of all acknowledge, speaking of Parks and Rec, Doug Damery. We had a very successful softball tournament in town last week. 116 teams descended on Normal, and by all accounts, it went extremely well. Weather was pretty good most of the time. We had a couple of, one day in particular where we had some rough weather, but it really didn't cause problems. Doug will be the first to say it's a team effort, not only Parks and Rec involved, but a number of other departments, fire, I'm just looking out there, IT, finance, police, I'm sure others that were very involved in putting on a tournament of this scale. Kerry Fry, the tournament director, of course, he's just an old hand, and he's got it down pat, but did a fabulous job. Mr. Fritzen represented the council well at the opening ceremonies, which were great. He didn't realize it was hazardous duty, but he was put in the line of fire of the Jesse White tumblers. And as tall as he is with his hands up, they still were able to flip over him, but I was a little worried for him for a while, but that was really a great event at the Corn Crib, and thanks to the Corn Belters, they allowed us to use that facility, and it was really a great, I think weather was perfect, and the girls had a ball, and it was really a great event. So I want to acknowledge Doug and his team in particular for, there's the hard work comes months and months before. Certainly the week of the event, there's a lot of work, but there's a tremendous amount of planning. The Convention Visitors Bureau, of course, was very involved. To pull something like that off is a huge undertaking, but such a benefit to the community. These teams were here for the better part of a week, and if you were out at restaurants or shopping, you saw them everywhere, because they were literally everywhere, and it was a great boost to the local economy, and that's really part of what this is all about, as well as to celebrate some excellent young athletes who had, I think, a really good time here, and I think the community presented itself very well to these teams and their families. I also want to make a couple of announcements. I want to introduce John Burkhart, who you've seen before. He's been here before as the interim water director, but we removed the interim title. So I think this is, John officially started today as the director. He took a little left turn, and we reassigned him down in the department to address a specific problem. He did that, and while he was on hiatus from the director position, Greg Tremmel, who knew at that time very little about the water operation, but stepped in and agreed at my request to take the helm and did a fantastic job kind of keeping the ship steered in the right direction. And Greg now today moved back to inspections. And then Scott Williams in the back of the room. Scott stepped in and covered for Greg. Of course, unfortunately, he had to do his old job too. So he was wearing two hats during a very, very busy time in the inspections department. But I want to certainly congratulate John, and I want to thank both Greg and Scott for agreeing to step up and take on a lot of extra duty for roughly 6 months, and really appreciate it. But hopefully everything's settled back down. They're back in their comfortable spots, and we look forward to John having a long career in the water department. So congratulations, John. That's all I got.
Thank you. Yeah, the softball tournament, the opening ceremony, and of course, the Jesse White tumblers never fail to invigorate a crowd, and then you get asked to stand in line, and Crystal Howard stood at the front of the line first, and then she changed places with me, wanted me in the front of the line as they came running at you full speed and hit that mini tramp and then went over the top of you. And to see their faces coming at you and the concentration they had, you understand their success. They're able to kind of, you're just an obstacle there. You're not really a person at that point in time, I don't think. So that was interesting. But around 500 volunteers to make that thing happen. And so, the staff and the community as a whole really embraces that, and we're enriched by that. Of course, Mayor Coos is not here this evening. He just returned from a trip to Japan to visit our sister city, Saikawa, and trust we'll hear some good report on that trip down the road. Our police department received recognition earlier, but this past week or so ago, they also received notification that our CALIA certification was once again awarded. If I remember right, it was the 8th time.
Number 8.
I participated in the process this time and was interviewed during that, and I know it was a very thorough time that I spent, and so if those who were on site during the certification process were that thorough with everyone else, it's not a done deal. You have to meet the requirements to get that certification. And beyond that, I don't remember the exact terminology, but we also were notified we received an award of merit or
Excellence.
award of excellence, which
something like that.
again is not passed out readily to a lot of departments. So congratulations to the police department for.
Think of the over 100 agencies that received certification this year, 16 received this additional award of excellence, so that's pretty special.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. And of course, there was a news item today about someone announcing a retirement, and Mark got through the day and whatever, but I think as you see tonight and the conversation tonight and your remarks tonight about things, he's going to be fully engaged through the end of that process, and we'll have plenty of time to thank Mark down the road there. But a lot of what the result of this planning and things of that nature, I think, I was asked today by some of the media about Mark's achievements, and I think one of those things that is a great achievement is how he has directed us to processes that have helped us make better, wiser decisions. And we talked about why now for this, and I had that on my list too, Ms. Lorenz. It isn't because of neglect, it's just, but in the way we have done business in the town of Normal over the last 20 years, in particular the last probably 10 to 15 years, even more so, that we work through a lot of plans like this, and it helps us to make better policy decisions and stronger decisions and long-lasting decisions. So I think that'll be part of Mr. Peterson's legacy that won't be visible. There's a lot of things in the community that are really visible by seeing them. This will be visible in how we feel and operate throughout the community. So appreciate Mr. Peterson. I know it's not an easy time when's the right time to make an announcement of that nature, and we had kind of hoped to conceal a little longer because we wanted to make sure it didn't impact Mark's effectiveness, but the quality of our staff, just the comments that we made tonight about how we've got some interchangeable parts here and people who could step up to the plate, that's an indication of just how strong the organization is. So we're in good hands, and appreciate what you've done, and like I said, we'll have plenty of time in the future to say other nice things about you. But,
Thank you, Joe.
any other remarks? Our meeting's adjourned.
yes.
Oh, Ms. Lorenz?
I just have to give a shout out to the men and maybe women in the sewer division as the keepers of civilization. That's what they refer to themselves as. We talked about them tonight. Let's give them a special shout out as well.
Sure. All right, we're adjourned. Oh, we have to have a motion for adjournment, I guess, don't we?
Move we adjourn.
And
Thank you.
All in favor?
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
All right, now we're adjourned. Thank you.
Good job.
Was this your first?
And thank you for not making me read the McCurdy appointment.
I wondered who was gonna, Mayor Pro Tem.
The keepers of civilization?
That's good. I have a son who used to work in that division.
Yeah, that's what, in my orientation, that's how they referred to me.
We got a note from Scott, he got
Okay.
He got what? Oh, ill? Oh, my, okay.
Yeah.
Hi there, you're in GLC, right?
It's purple now.
Yes.
Gas. It's a different one?
I don't even know what it is. What's it for? Oh, for ISU. Are they getting fancy?
No. I wonder if
Well,
typically they give us red.
oh, maybe they're out of, their ink is low and it turned purple.